And we're back. Welcome to Abstractable. I'm Lockie and this is Ryan. And this is a podcast for people who are curious about the world around them like we are and love to discover new things. In this episode, we talk about one of our favourite podcasts from this year that has a really clickbaity sort of title, and it's called How to Get Rich by Naval Ravikant.
And we cover a bit of ground. We talk about how Naval has gone from washing dishes to running multiple companies and being an investor in Twitter, Yammer and Uber, as well as many others. We talk about how his philosophy on life has shaped who he is, but why he still sees himself as a lazy guy. And we obviously also talk about how to get rich and the principles that he believes get you there.
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting podcast because I reckon it's a little bit like his version of Ray Dalio's Principles book, but it's obviously delivered through a podcast in much more of a sort of a short form sort of thing.
Yeah, and you can definitely find out a lot more about Naval through Twitter @Naval and also his website, theangelphilosopher.com. Some of my other favourite interviews and podcasts from 2019 were his long form with Joe Rogan and also with The Knowledge Project. So we really hope you enjoy this episode. We certainly did. Cheers. We're back.
It's been
what a way to open.
I know. Have we been on hiatus a little?
Yeah. Not that anyone else knows that when they're listening to this.
So
but we do.
We'll cut that. How have you been?
Really well, mate. Really well. And we've have we upgraded?
Oh, we've upgraded, yeah. This is our new home, so we're going to be recording here from the new FSC offices, which is the company that me and two others started. So this will be our new place where we don't have to rejig the setup every time. We can just get in and get going, I reckon.
Mind you, it's still pretty ghetto with these these boxes that we're popping our mics up with.
It's a work in progress.
We're getting there. We're iterating.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. And today we're just doing something different. We are recording a analysis on a particular podcast, which is not a book, but we still love books. But we're kind of broadening our sphere to, I think that we're making our podcast for the curious people. So, we want to try and share things that we've consumed and found really enlightening, interesting, want to talk about, and that we talk about to each other. So this is definitely one of them, the Naval podcast that you found. Yeah. How did you find it?
Okay. So I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast, funnily enough, with Naval. Which I think I sent you that as well.
Yeah, that is awesome, by the way.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
I'd actually listened to Naval on Tim Ferriss's show previously.
Yeah.
Quite a while ago, I think, from memory. And, I was pretty impressed at the time, but I, just didn't really pursue much afterwards because I guess he hasn't, as far as I'm aware, produced a book or anything. So, the automatic is to listen while these guys are making podcasts. All right, what books do they got? Or, what have they done? And so listening to him, I obviously didn't pursue too much. And then listening to him talk then on Joe Rogan and the tweet storm, the infamous tweet storm came up throughout the podcast, and that was a central focus for the episode. And some of the stuff he's saying was just really, really resonating. So anyway, I jumped onto the podcast, listened to the whole thing, and I think I was about, within the first 8 minutes, I'd probably sent it to you. I'd sent it to Jazzy.
Yeah.
I'd sent it to half of my contacts list, just saying, listen to this.
And I ignored it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then you said, no, really, listen to this. And I did. And it was, it's really amazing. It's so dense as well. But the podcast is essentially, he goes through each of these tweets that he put out in small bite-sized episodes. You can get the whole thing in one big mega episode towards the end of his podcast stream. But he explains all these different tweets, and the tweet storm is about How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky is the name. But he kind of says in there that it's about creating wealth, but getting rich is a catchier title. So,
well, the opening tweet of that tweet storm is seek wealth, not money or status. It's kind of these three like different dimensions that that people subliminally go to when they're talking about wealth and money generation.
Yeah. So he's still releasing them. I've noticed he keeps releasing small episodes, but the first kind of season, if you will, is about 3 hours long, and you can crank it out in a day while you're washing your car and doing your chores or whatever. But it's really dense. So I've managed to, I got a bit obsessed with it and listened to it 3 times. Because there's just so much.
I think that's the nature of the podcast itself. Right?
But we loved it, so we thought while it's fresh in our minds, let's talk about it. So,
so what can you tell us about Naval, or should I say, the enigma that is Naval?
Yeah, so it took me quite a while to do this biography this time, and full disclosure, there's probably some mistakes in this because it is very hard to find anything about this guy. He's a bit of an enigma. He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. There's not a lot of biographical articles about him. A lot of the stuff in here he kind of says in his podcast, but I think it gives good context to how he sort of came up with all this stuff. So he was born in New Delhi, India in 1974. Which is, a world away.
A world away and just a completely different life away to who he is now, I guess, which he describes.
And at the age of 9, he moved to the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He said he was raised by a single mother and into a pretty rough neighbourhood where he was obviously an immigrant and different to everyone else, I imagine. And so to stay off the streets, he spent most of his childhood in the library after school and was probably, I reckon, a classic nerd almost. He said he read all the books, which kind of says the voracious appetite for information he has. And
it was interesting, right? So because the reason that he was going to the library was that it was like a safe haven. So he's being a single mother, brought up by a single mother. She was dropping him there,
likely working
after school. Yeah, likely working double shifts or whatever it was to support the family, and that was like a safe place because if he'd sort of ended up going home, there was not just risk to safety, but also, he would have led on a completely different tangent and path in life to where he sort of ended up.
Yeah, absolutely. He said he always wanted to be the smartest person in the room, and he just remembered a lot of facts back then. He read all the books, remembered the facts. And if he didn't know, he just made the facts up. So he'd still sound smart, which is a good strategy. Yeah, we all know people, probably a couple sitting here that have done that once or twice. But he really valued being intelligent. He was obviously intelligent and lent into that pretty hard early on. And he worked throughout school as doing different menial jobs. And one of the big motivators for him was he was working as a caterer for this Indian food delivery service and some other stuff. And he had to serve wait tables at one of the people at his school. It's like big fancy rich person celebratory dinner or something like that. And he was walking around serving everyone else food and said that was quite embarrassing as a child. I imagine because he didn't have a lot of money growing up and was kind of feeling vulnerable about that. I'm not sure, but he was
embarrassed.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So I think that gives you an insight into his mindset. He was motivated to make wealth and make a life for himself.
to be the guy ordering the moe.
That's it. And now he almost certainly does. He graduated high school in 1991 and went to Dartmouth University or college and studied computer science and economics, graduating in 1995. So went to college. He said he was $400 short of being able to afford college and had to borrow it off someone, and hustled lots of jobs to be able to get in, because it was pretty obvious he was clearly smart enough, but yeah, struggled from an economic standpoint. So
pretty interesting, like themes, mate. Like, you know, the first 9 years spent in New Delhi, you know, you would have seen some wild shit, you know, back then.
Yeah,
seriously, like,
yeah,
even now you come across on the socials, just even maybe not so much now, but there was that period in time when, you know, like there was just every fucking weird video on Facebook that you could ever possibly see.
It's chaotic, right?
Yeah,
it's a different world.
And they clearly didn't have like the machine learning algorithms sorted out for video recognition and real fucked up videos that you shouldn't see.
Yeah, that scar you.
Yeah, that scar you for life. And you just happen to click on or even just autoplay some of those videos. Unbelievable. Like, you know, people getting run over by motorcycles and things and guts hanging out everywhere.
God.
Like, just seeing some weird shit and people just like continuing about their day and this dude's just on the ground.
Jeez.
I'm not saying that's a
normal occurrence.
But you know, it's the desensitization of everyone walking around that dude was kind of like, maybe this happens a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty full on. Although I would say that probably happens here too. How many times have you driven past a car crash on the freeway and just sort of horsed on?
Yeah,
turned the radio up and kept going.
I guess the thing is though, like if that car crash, like it's always attended by an ambo. You know, there's an ambulance on scene or a fire truck on scene or a police car on scene. I don't know if I've ever driven past one that's like someone's clearly just crashed their car. You know, there's smoke and maybe some fire or whatever. I don't know how you'd go in that situation.
No, yeah.
You'd have to stop.
You would. There's a lot of trauma. Like, it's full on. When a car crashes, it's
fucked. It
is, yeah. And that's, it's good. A lot of good people do a lot of good work.
We're pretty close here to the Alfred Hospital, which is like world renowned in terms of its like trauma care. But I suspect it's just because we get so many car crashes here.
Yeah, the mental, I don't know, burden from seeing all that would be full on.
Desensitizing.
Yeah.
You just walk past the guy on the street with his guts hanging out.
Jesus. So he was during college, he worked as an intern at a law firm and he got fired because he was basically just there for photocopying, but he spent his time surfing the early internet and they didn't like that.
Shit.
But they didn't really have anything for him to do, I don't think. So he always thought he'd be an astrophysicist when he was younger, but his mother kind of knew that he'd be going to business and it turned out that he did. So
I didn't realise. So you did computer science and economics and then went to work at a law firm.
Interned. I don't know whether it was, there's no date on that. It's an anecdote that he tells. And it was either, but my guess is it was during college as you're an intern. And then when he graduated, he worked as a computer programmer at a couple of companies and wanted to start his own business and would go around telling people he was going to do that.
Interesting on
Interesting
on the intern thing, right? Is it's actually through this podcast that he brings up Warren Buffett and Warren Buffett asking Benjamin Graham, you know, Mr. Value Investor, or you know, pretty well the guy that invented value investing, or has been regarded to have, and asks him for an internship, saying that he will work for free. And Benjamin Graham, you know, basically turns around and says to him, "You're overpriced." You know, so you're overpriced for the amount that you're going to get out of learning from me. And
he also says that the best type of educations are ones that you have to learn on the job.
Yeah, the apprenticeships.
Apprenticeship model.
Yeah.
And he's a massive Taleb fan, and his ideas are littered throughout this podcast. Yeah,
I think Taleb gets the most mentions.
Yeah,
absolutely the most mentions out of anyone.
Yeah. So he co-founded in 1999 a business called Ep.008, and it was a consumer reviews website. So it would aggregate reviews for different things that you bought and that sort of thing. He raised a fair bit of funding, and they sold to a company called Deal Time, which doesn't exist anymore, became shopping.com, which then sold to eBay for quite a lot of money. But Naval left sometime in the middle before it sold, and he and some other co-founders ended up suing one of the original co-founders and the venture capital firms for effectively misrepresenting the value of Ep.008 when it sold. And so
this
I think
his business partners. This is when he got fucked by his business partners.
Yeah. So in the podcast he says that he's made three kind of. Well, he said he's made his money incrementally, but he said he got screwed over by his co-founders with one of the small fortunes he made. The second, he quickly lost on the share market almost straight away, and then the third time, he has held onto it and done a number of things. But he said it's come in small chunks. It hasn't come in one big payday for him.
Yeah. And that's, and when we're talking this, we're talking money.
Yeah.
But across that entire horizon of time is kind of the whole entire premise of this podcast is that he's continued to generate wealth as a result. He's continued to generate wealth in not just financial sense, because that was having, you know, the highs and lows of market corruption, external forces, all the other exciting things, just general ignorance. But along the way, he's sort of just bolstered his own identity, his own brand, his own understanding of the world. And now it's really coming out to the point where he said, you know, I think he said, I could lose all of my money, you know, this week, but I know in a year's time I'll be in a really great place.
Yeah, and he says you want to be making money is a skill set, and you want to know that so that you can be well off in 999 of 1,000 universes if you're put into. And he says that there's some things that you can't replace. You need to have all your limbs. You need to have an education, and that's, you know, you're going to struggle without that. But once you've got that, you're able to learn this. And one of his things is he says everyone can get rich. And wealth he's quite level-headed. He's not saying everyone is going to be a billionaire, right? But he explains that, and it's pretty clever, that wealth is not a zero-sum game. We can create more and more and more of it, which is why we're not all fighting over the same jobs in a cave, he says. It's because as the economies expand, it creates more for everyone. And yeah, he's got an interesting view, and he's not talking about dodgy capitalism. He says crony capitalism, where the government helps the big companies out and all that sort of dodgy stuff that's happening now.
The big companies help the politicians out, and the politicians through the government help the big companies out.
And it screws over the little guy. So that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about kind of the pure free market trade of capitalism. And look, there's certainly nuances to that could be a whole different podcast. that I'm not sure I agree fully with. But he's certainly right, you know. And one of the most interesting things he says, I reckon, that resonated with me is like, I'd rather be a poor person now than an aristocrat 200 years ago, because there was no antibiotics. There's, you know, pretty much no healthcare, no cars, no understanding of like nutrition and stuff. And yeah, a lot of people are really worse off, but generally the bar has risen and all boats have
lifted as a result
with the tide.
Yeah, we're not just continually dividing up the fucking pie.
No, and
the pie is getting bigger.
And the nuance in that everybody, including myself, are kind of annoyed about is that the pie isn't being divided very fairly as we go along. It's leaving some people behind, but there's no doubt that there is a general increase in quality of life from 200-300 years ago. That's a fact.
Yeah, the tail, both the tail ends is where the concern is. So the top 1% and the bottom 1%, and just how disproportionate the gap is that's growing between them.
So let's fix that. Yeah. But let's not throw the whole system out that got us here,
let's not stop growing the pie.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, he also founded a company called Vast.com, which is a classified ads marketplace. He got married somewhere along the way. He's got a family. But what he really started doing, when he really started to, I guess, have his biggest success was when he started the blog Venture Hacks with his co-creator Babak Nivi, who's also on the podcast. And they created this, I suppose, blog that helped people figure out how to raise money and how the venture capital game works and that sort of thing. And he put his name to it and took the accountability and used his knowledge of the area, and later kind of parlayed that into his business where he's become very successful, called Angel List, where he and his co-founder Babak, they effectively, it helps raise capital for startups, angel capital. So,
well, it is the Facebook for venture capital. It's it's the social media of startups.
The Match.com for investors and startups, it says.
Yeah, bang.
Yeah, and he's an early supporter of crypto. He loves crypto. He's an early investor in Twitter, Yammer, Stack Overflow and Uber and Squarespace and a number of others. And you can mainly find his work on Twitter. It's kind of the medium he kind of chooses. And these podcasts are kind of his latest venture, and probably his first time he's really, really stuck his neck out in a pub, to the greater public. I think he put his name to and he's quite famous in Silicon Valley because of the venture hack stuff where he first put his name to something. But this is more for the broad population, people like you and me, and hopefully everyone that's listening, watching this. And his current net worth is estimated about 2.2 billion from a poor kid in India. So
he's come a long way.
Yeah. And I guess the idea of this whole podcast is that he's trying to give you the baseline things that he's figured out, broadly applicable, that can
timeless
help anyone do it
timeless
to a certain point. Yeah. And you might, and everyone's got different goals. Not everyone. I certainly don't want to be, do what it takes to become a billionaire, but it will help you succeed. And what he says is like, money doesn't make you happy, but not having it causes a lot of problems and means you don't have freedom.
Yeah. Well, money doesn't solve all your problems, but money solves all your money problems.
Yeah. And
it's like the classic quote.
And not having it is a problem because you're indebted to others. You have to go to work every day. You don't have a lot of choice. It can cause problems at home, all sorts of stuff. So you might as well be trying to plus you spend so much of your life working that you might as well be trying to do it in the way that's going to get you to where you want to be, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be super rich, but why not do it in the most effective way possible if you just want to own your house or whatever.
Yeah, he gives you the. He speaks to it as it gives you the opportunity for freedom, right? It's not that, but he also, it's kind of disclaimed with some of the most unhappy people in the world are the richest people in the world.
Yeah,
right. I'm sure there's kids back in Mumbai that are having a far better time, living on the streets than some of the richest people are, just in terms of mental state and overall happiness and just enjoying what it is that they're doing in life. And the point he's trying to make is the leverage that you can have over what it is that you do with your time can be far greater enabled with money, and the classic thing is, it's once I'm not sure what it is in Australia here, but it's something like once you've reached the threshold of, $60,000, $70,000 income per household, beyond that, there's decreasing benefit across time.
The more you make.
But it's not to say that, I think Daniel Kahneman talks about, that's true, right? So the happiness doesn't necessarily increase, but success and the feeling of success continues to increase as a result of earning more money.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which is that's been psychologically tested.
Yeah,
and measured.
Yeah, I've thought a fair bit about this, and I reckon that it's just all about choice. That's all it is. If you want a bunch of stuff, then you can do that. That's your choice. But if you keep living above your means, whatever that is, you won't be. It's very hard to be happy because it's so much pressure on you, and also, you're just never going to get ahead. So you can attack that two ways. You can have very little or nothing, and then you've got heaps of freedom because you don't really need much. Classic, the surfer guy who lives in his van, right? He's completely free. He's not really beholden to much, but he hasn't got a lot he hasn't really got a safety net either. So he's made that kind of, he's made that trade-off,
Classic thing is, you got the 35-year-old, corporate high roller who's talking to his surfy mate who's been living out of his van for the last, 10, 15 years. One's been in the rat race. The other's been living by the beach. They're having a chat. And the corporate guy goes, I'm just working towards my retirement where I can live by the beach and just hang out there and spend my time, having a surf, being the waves with my family. And the 35-year-old surfer goes, I've been doing that for 15 years.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
It totally depends on what you want. And like the classic thing is, right, is quite often is what happens is, and this is like the Achilles heel in like the rat race, if you will. I hate to use that cliche, but the rat race. People are ratcheting up their lifestyle as their salary and their income is getting ratcheted up.
And everyone does that. I do that, even though I've thought a lot about this.
Yeah, it just happens, right? You look at yourself, and it's not something you notice. Just like anything that changes over time, you're not noticing it in the moment, but when you reflect back 10 years or 5 years, you're like, shit. I'm having 3 coffees a day that I'm buying now rather than one.
I won't stay at the hostel anymore. I'm staying at this nice resort or whatever, right? Yeah. Like it just happens.
I fly fucking Qantas rather than
that's right.
Tiger.
Well, that's a safety thing. So you don't want to die.
Don't say that.
Allegedly.
I have flown with Tiger many times and I've survived.
Okay. Well, that's a personal choice of yours.
Personal choice.
And the other side of that is you can get not take on too much obligation, live below your means, don't have a lot of debt, you can have freedom. Or you can get all that stuff, become rich, pay it off, have heaps of money, and then have freedom too. So it's just how you want to attack it. But the bottom line is don't spend more than you earn.
Yeah, because your expectations continue to build and increase.
Yeah. And
beyond what your means are.
He talks about this, doesn't he? A little bit, yeah. So
deeply.
So should we hit a couple of the points that there's a bit in it, but a couple of the really key stuff that we got out of it. And take the time to listen to this.
I think it's like 2.5 hours or 2.5 hours, 3 hours, whatever. Yeah. Like it's, a commute home and a commute to work.
Yep.
And you're almost there.
Make the time.
Depending on how far you live from work.
Yep.
So we were talking about freedom before, and there's a couple of things there. There's like the journey to getting to freedom, and then there's what are you doing with that freedom? And, as you're saying, some people just want to seek the sort of material, opulent lifestyle. Some will argue that there's absolutely no real fulfillment in that and probably missing the point, whatever. Who might argue with that?
Personal choice.
Personal choice, right? Let's say, buying Maseratis and living in multi-million dollar mansions is not your thing, but you have like this, deep ingrained passion to save the planet. To remove plastic from beaches on the ocean.
Yep.
Right? One way that you can just have absolute impact on that particular cause, that thing that just gets you up in the morning that you're so passionate about, is enabling your own leverage. Having leverage to have that impact. Everyone's only got the same, relatively about the same amount of time, assuming you don't get chopped off at the knees.
What is leverage?
Yeah. So what is leverage?
What is leverage?
So leverage, let's talk it a little bit abstractly. Leverage would be the amount of value that you can create, or the amount of impact that you can create as a result of that value generation per time.
By your actions, do you think? Or
well, I think everything is your action, right?
Ooh.
Everything
So a physical example would be the lever. You've got fulcrum. You pull it and it's levered in a way that you can lift much heavier things, for example. So that concept also applies to
the classic fulcrum,
your efforts, or there's different ways to do that, isn't there?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that if you've got the fulcrum or the balance, you want to have that fulcrum sitting as close to you as possible, and still be able to press it down, and everything else on the other side lifts up. So it's to maximize that leverage.
You're using something else, a tool, to multiply your actions.
Yeah.
By many, many times. And
multiply your actions, multiply what it is that you're getting out per value of your time.
Per time. Yeah. So like working at this office, what's the thing that with your time can make the most impact, and how can you multiply that impact? And this is a big theme for him in this podcast. And one of the things that was really enlightening to me, how clearly he kind of put this, that he said there's 3 types of leverage in the world. There's labor.
Which is like the oldest form of leverage.
And the easiest to understand. I find this the easiest to understand.
This is the fucking pharaohs back in Egypt, having 6,000 dudes build their pyramids, or however many hundreds, it might even be hundreds of thousands of people build their pyramids.
Yeah, and he he talks about that, you on a building site, like Ryan said, you're building this pyramid, you've got 10,000 people, and the pharaoh says, move these blocks into this shape, and they do it through force, whipping, all these horrible things, I imagine. They're slaves. And these days you pay people for that, but it's the one that people understand.
Pay people to be slaves?
No, I'm not saying that. But you pay people for work. Don't twist my words. And they get something out of that with a secure paycheck that they get every month. And they're doing stuff for you, and you are hopefully, as the business owner or whatever, getting, multiplying your ideas through their labor and getting the benefit from that financially and otherwise. So, and that's the one that people understand the most. And he says that's why your parents are impressed when how many people are working for you. Oh, you've got a promotion. There's 12 people working for me now. Oh, well done, whatever. And it's certainly the one I understand the most and have thought about probably before.
It's the one that has that real tangible feel to it,
Yeah. And the second being capital, he talks about, which is money, effectively. And it's more complex. So you can borrow money to buy a home. It costs $1 million in Melbourne, which is crazy. But
that's a one-bedder?
One bed studio apartment. And you put in, say, $100,000, borrow the $900,000, the price goes up, you slowly pay that back. But as it goes up, you're getting much bigger return on your $100,000 because you've borrowed that money than you would if you just had 100 only. So there's risk in it, but you can leverage your returns through that money. Or you can use your money to invest in, if you're the bank, you can use that money to invest in, say, a startup, and you don't really have to do anything. You just put that money there, and then the market cap of that startup goes up, you make money.
Yeah. And so the thing with this whole capital thing, right, is it's this continually building, evolving beast as well. And because the financial world has just become so complex, in order to play the money for money sake game, the banks and the investment, if you don't have that real high baseline with all the, the quants and staff bolstering you up, it's a tough game to play because it's become so tightly controlled, but also controlled from a government perspective, but also from the monopolies, if you will, that are in the sort of helm, the top seat, that are just,
it's unfair,
creating the complexity on complexity.
Yeah, because if you've got it, it keeps compounding. Yeah.
But it's no reason why people can't also start playing that game as well.
Hell no. That's right. And then the last one, which was fascinating to me, is that he talks about technology and media with low cost of replication probably the newest form that's accessible to everyone. It's very egalitarian because everyone can do it pretty much these days, and it's massive leverage. So this podcast, we can now record this, put this up on Apple Podcasts, and theoretically 10 million people can download it. And we've still only recorded it once. We haven't had to do it 10 million times. And the internet and technology's made that, the current technology has made that really, really easy, because back in the day we would have had to go on roadshow and talk to people, and we'd never have reached as many people and have to do it over and over and over again, or rely on a third party like a publisher or a TV network to pitch this to. They would then so there was a massive gatekeeper, because then they would publish it for us, and because it costs money, we'd have to go through them. And this is coupled with his idea that people are worried about the robot revolution, but he reckons it's already here. They're all just packed in data centers. So there's millions and millions and millions of computers that you can get to work for you for very, very little, as long as you know how to speak to them, which is to code. You need to speak their language, and you can use them to almost infinitely leverage what you're doing.
But
that is crazy.
That's the thing, though, is like any coder themselves could create the next big thing.
Yeah.
Know, right? The next Facebook, or, it's not saying it's an easy thing, but the possibility is there. The possibility is now in anyone's hand to utilize this technology.
And most people haven't figured it out yet, he says.
Yeah.
And that was I'm not doing that. I'm not really using that type of leverage often, probably starting with this podcast, but that is just such an eye-opener for me.
Yeah. And this is the thing, right, is that technological leverage, though, everyone has it and everyone uses it at the same time. So you compare, go back even 20 years ago, right, the amount of just base leverage that we have now in our hands. I can Google anything. I have in my hand my phone, which has more information power than, what the most powerful man on the planet had 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The President of the United States or whatever.
What about what he says about Jeff Bezos and how technology is a bit of an equaler in that way? Do you remember that? It's to your point. He sort of says that Jeff doesn't he's talking about the rich and the poor, and that technology is a great leveler because Jeff Bezos doesn't get a better type of search result when he types it into Google. He gets the same as us. He talks about, he
doesn't get faster delivery on Amazon. Although he might have a Jeff's only priority mail. Yeah.
He doesn't get, better Netflix shows. Everyone gets the Netflix shows. He has better holidays because that's more around labor and
money.
But
do you know what I mean? What is a better holiday? Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Well, that's a deep dive, but isn't that really interesting? I never thought of that either. That
it's like the ultimate democracy almost. It's the ultimate
it's
equality.
Equal. It's equality. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. It's amazing. Because because the power is given to the consumer through these technologies. The only issue right there is that at the same time as the power is in the hand of the consumer, there is now, through data and analytics, there is also so much more power that's generated off the back of the consumer's
that's very true.
Input into that.
That's true.
The classic, what does Google think of such and such today? What's the opinion saying about Donald Trump at the moment? So you start typing in, is Donald Trump a World War I conspirator? Is Donald Trump a Nazi?
Yeah. Yeah, it goes the other way too, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
And he says that the internet has massively changed the amount of jobs that are available. Most people haven't figured that out yet. So think about that as an opportunity. So you can have an army of robots working for you, basically for free or very, very little cost. They can leverage more than the other two types, which are much harder to get, or arguably the same or more than the other two types, which are much harder to get and control, capital and labour. And not many people have figured that out. That is something we should all be looking at. So I've downloaded a Learn to Code app on my phone, and I'm starting to.
You started learning to code.
Yeah, I've learned how to type my name in Python. So,
well, there's been so living under a rock. You miss some of the exciting things of the moment, if you will. Exciting things of the moment. And apparently there was like this like just absolute controversy created. I think it was on Twitter, around this like Learn to Code hashtag thing, and basically the entire thing getting shut down because it was like this, this facetious having a go at, particular industries that were becoming redundant in essence as a result of, the technological revolution. And, it's just, learn to code.
Mm. Yeah, okay.
Which is, it's all well and good.
It's demeaning.
Yeah,
right?
very demeaning, all well and good to say. But,
Yeah.
People are in different circumstance.
Yeah, that's just horrible.
Yeah. But it just blew up.
Really?
Yeah, and so much so that, as these things like evolve and morph, and become like slightly more nuanced in how they sound, they drop off a word and then, it just becomes, L2C or something like that, or it becomes
like,
a code, this code name.
Yeah.
But then they all get shut down as well, as a result of these social media.
It's a cesspool.
Yeah.
It really is. Tell me about specific knowledge.
So he talks about how you need to find your own specific knowledge, right? And find your own specific knowledge and apply that leverage that we were just talking about, So by finding your specific knowledge, you are better able to apply this leverage. So specific knowledge is in essence what it is that you can do that no one else can do, that society wants or that society values, or society doesn't know that it yet values but will value. So that's kind of like, if you hit that on the head, then and it's within some sort of timely nature. You don't want that to be in 100 years' time when it might be a little bit too far gone by then. Then you've hit the nail on the head.
Interesting that happens to a lot of artists, I think.
Yeah.
They die and then they become popular.
Mm.
Death does great things to your career if you're a musician or a painter or something.
Artist.
Which is a shame.
So, all right, here's the question. So is it because that they died, or is it because they were just like so onto where things were going? They were so on like the cold front of where things were going that they kind of predicted what it was going to be, expressed that in their various art form. And it's just that it wasn't until 100 years later, 200 years later, that the rest of society caught up with it.
Yeah, I reckon it's a bit of both. Like, it depends on the person. But take Van Gogh, for example. I think he was ahead of his time. But having died, but then you take some musicians like Jeff Buckley or whatever, they died. If you die at the peak of your popularity, it kind of immortalizes you because people long for more, I think. I think that this guy, so talented, everyone loved him. Kurt Cobain, he dies.
Mm.
It's so much sadness because you've got that connection to them, but you also know it's now become a finite product that you're never going to get any more of. So I think that's part of it, depending on the situation. But interestingly, with the Van Gogh stuff, when his brother funded a lot of his work, and then his widow, I think it's his widow, and his brother then spent a lot of time after he died pushing his work, getting it out there, showing people, and really promoting it. And that led to a lot of his success as well. It didn't just no one just stumbled across that and thought, this is brilliant, There was a marketing machine behind it too. Because it is fantastic. And I think that that timing, the invention of photography, painting probably became a little bit venturing into something that I'm not an expert at. But, painting became more abstract and more expressionist after that, I assume, was one of the reasons. And he kind of died, it's bloody interesting. But the work's great.
Yeah, at this intersectional point. Yeah, that's
timing,
the thing.
Right?
The thing.
Timing.
When every man and their dog could, not even every man and their dog, when anyone could just replicate reality with the click of a button, and probably back then there was a bit of a flash and a bang and a heap of smoke and other things going on, technology had kind of made the artist redundant. To a degree.
Well,
as the current
as a trade
representative, yeah. As a trade. Yeah. The portrait of the family was now done by a camera rather than being done by a painter.
Interesting theory. So painters, that was a trade, right? You'd go and paint things for people. No cameras. Cameras come along, new technology, and the trade pushes more towards art. That's an interesting thought. I wonder what else that's going to happen to.
Well, that isn't that the theory though? Is that the great contingent workforce that we're going to become, right, is going to be primarily and more growingly focused around the creative industries, creative arts, to the point where we would just become creatures of leisure, basking in our own creativity and doing nothing but creative thought.
We're
a fair way away from
like
that.
Like a utopia.
Yeah, until all the over surveillance and you don't actually know what you're thinking because everyone else is thinking it.
Because the robot tells you what to think.
The robot tells you what you're thinking.
It knows you better than you know yourself.
Yeah, and then you realise that you need to unplug yourself.
And run to the woods.
So
good tangent though.
Yeah, well, so
let's get back to it.
well, yeah, it's interesting, right? So Van Gogh, right? He had a very specific knowledge, and he was authentic to who he was.
Yes.
This is quite interesting, right? Because you hear a lot of these artists, jumping back into your little tangent. You hear a lot of these artists, maybe going mad or just, completely losing their grasp on reality and normality, if you will. But that's kind of at the same time them embracing themselves, being wholly authentic to their trade, being wholly authentic to who it is that they are. So that.
Do you think it's like a link to madness?
Well,
or is people often say creativity is on the edge of insanity, right?
Yeah. Well, there's like the cold front of creativity and how it then blurs the line between that and madness. Just as like, a tier before that, you've kind of got like what society thinks is normal, and then moving into the sort of cold fronts of creativity. And it's kind of like just continually moving along that spectrum of, it's kind of like you got to have the links back to what everything else that's going on. And we're still social creatures, right? So if you're right on, the absolute basking fringe, have you lost some of your grasp on the innate nature of who we are because you're no longer social? You've lost some of that social element, that ability to really interact. Maybe that,
man,
that's like a check.
To get a psychologist on this podcast.
Yeah, I need someone who knows a lot more than. You need like Daniel.
It's
Danny
really
Carmen
interesting though.
So the main thing being, right, these artists need to be authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
no one can be Van Gogh, can they?
Yeah,
he's just his own entity.
Like every single human being on the planet is unique, and this is Naval emphasizes this. We are all unique. You need to be authentic to who it is that you are. In order to do that, you need to know who you are. And so that's like a continual process of discovery, and Naval feels like he knew who he was at quite a early age. And he also talks to, it's quite interesting because a lot of who we are has already been, developed and decided by the time.
And it's usually what you like to do as well.
Yeah.
You're good at it. It's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
You're good at it. That makes you feel good. You like to do it.
Society
that makes
values
you better at it. Makes you feel better. You like it a bit more.
It's a continuous loop.
That's what you're passionate about.
Well, so he talks to it can't just be, you can't just do what it is that you are wholly passionate about if there is absolutely no provision of value to society.
Or if it's a ridiculously crowded field. Like you might love running the 100 meters, but it's going to be hard work to beat Usain Bolt. But you probably have 2 or 3 other skills that you enjoy too. You might be really charismatic or something like that, and you could combine the running with some sort of social event and make a running club where you talk to everyone on the run. All of a sudden, people want that, right? You become very good if you combine 2 or 3 things that you're good at. The field of people that can also do that is a lot narrower. You're more likely to be one of the better ones, which he credits Scott Adams with what this calls the skill sack. And his example was that he created Dilbert. He was funny. He'd been in businesses, so he'd lived the corporate life, and he could draw. And he combined those 3 things and made Dilbert, and no one else was doing that. So he became the best at that. Much less competition because he was being authentic to his particularly set of circumstances, but it also related to a lot of people out there. They felt that it's funny.
Yeah, well, there was an audience for it because he hit this intersection of 3 things that he was passionate about, that he had deep specific knowledge in, that he developed across time. And then as you said from Scott Adams, you just need to become, you don't need to be the best at one thing. You don't need to be the Usain Bolt. Once you're getting into that space of competing with the top 1 percentiles, you are living and breathing every single hour of your waking day that one thing. That's what these Olympians are.
You're massively reducing your chance of success.
Correct. Yep. And potentially not being wholly authentic to who you are either. Quite often if you've dived into this one thing, maybe you've missed some of the other stuff that's on offer and blinkered that out of your life. And then, we get into, again, the space of happiness and that type of stuff.
He talks a lot about building a personal brand too. What do you think about that? He thinks that you should take accountability by putting your name to things and not really hide behind. And, you've got to be out there and that builds that unique brand.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So you
not everyone does that.
No. Well,
not all successful people either.
No. Once you've kind of naturally found out what it is that your specific knowledge is, your accountability, and I think Nivi actually says this, I think throughout the pod, and it's accountability is intrinsically and totally proportional to success that you'll create. So the more accountable you are, the more responsible that you are to what it is that you are creating, there is an absolute correlation to how much success it can be made. At the same time, it's also correlated with risk.
Yeah.
So you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your dollars on the line, you're putting yourself on the line, you're putting your name, your brand, your identity on the line. It's risky. It's the risk.
But another thing he says is that that's a bit overblown, that as long as you do it with integrity and give it a real red hot go, most people won't really care.
Yeah.
But that might be a bit of a bias for Silicon Valley but I feel like it's starting to permeate. And if you are genuinely honest and gave something a go, most people kind of respect that, I reckon. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's the biggest thing is, but as soon as you like lack or, as soon as you're less authentic about that thing, then that'll come out, right? Not only are you going to be lacking the energy and lacking the real sort of motivation to put into it, because it's, still a lot of hard work to get to the top 25th percentile. So I was saying before, you need to be
easy.
It's not easy. You need to, if you're going to be in top 25th percentile of three things in order to get this sort of combo, this ultimate combo in something, it's still a fuckload of work.
Yeah. You have to dedicate yourself to it.
And so you want to have the energy to put into that. So if you're not authentic, if you're not genuine to that, you're going to struggle.
And if you do something really dodgy and fail, then that's not going to work either. If you're Bernie Madoff, he mentions.
Well,
you're done.
That's like the integrity.
That's the integrity bit, yeah.
Integrity piece. And
sorry.
I was going to say, yeah. Well, but that's not just you, like, so trust is another one of those kind of things that really compounds over time. They use the example, this is why career politicians, regardless of kind of their agenda or whatever it is, they're able to still get things done in somewhat of a broken system, if you will, to a degree, or just an overly bureaucratic system, because they can make deals with, say, the other side or someone that's kind of a little bit different to their position, because they know that they'll still be in the game in 10 years' time, because they've built that trust, because they've been in the game for 40 years. Whilst there's a lot of inherent problems with these career politicians, they're still able to get some things done because they've built up the trust associated with who it is that they are in their own brand, that they can make the deals, the longer term trust deals, because you rub my back now, I'll rub your back later on. And they know that they can draw on that.
Is there anything that you didn't like about this podcast? What are the criticisms?
Definitely is. So this is the challenge, right? With any sort of broader brush type arguments, because it comes down to how well the person that's portraying it's able to articulate it, and then how well that the listener is actually able to interpret it and make their own interpretation. So you can make all these. That's kind of one thing. Is it's there's a lot of opportunity for people to make their own interpretations and maybe go on completely wild tangents. And maybe I'm going on completely wild tangent with how I'm interpreting the whole podcast. So there's probably elements of that you miss a bit of that sort of tangibility, when things are a little bit broader brush.
Yeah. I wonder as well, it is so dense. Like, I showed it to a friend and they're like, oh, they're really nerding out on this. And I was thinking, am I enjoying this because I really love diving into this stuff? Or is it accessible? Is it accessible enough to the general person? I don't know. Who maybe doesn't read as many business books as you and I, or whatever, who really enjoys the space.
I would say no, right? Because anytime that you're going to mention some of these things that are a little bit abstract or a little bit theoretical, and if you haven't seen it elsewhere before, and you're hearing then just this sort of wild theory that just comes out, be the best at three things. Oh, sorry, be in the top 25% of three things.
Oh yeah, thanks. Whatever.
What does that even mean?
How do I start?
Or what does being authentic mean? Or what does being genuine mean?
And I think the other thing is it takes a lot of reflection. This podcast, you need to think about it afterwards and make the time for it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the what are the things that I now need to do? as a result of listening to this.
Yeah, and
It's
I don't think I've figured out. I'm still not sure I understand everything in there and want to keep diving in and thinking about it and thinking about what it means for me.
Yeah.
But what do I, is it actionable? What do I do? You know?
Yeah. I think,
How do I start?
Yeah. I totally agree that I think there's definitely some accessibility issues, but at the same time, I think it does an amazing job.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing podcast. Might be some accessibility issues in people needing, to build up that base level of knowledge. As he says, the best way that you can, so he also says a lot of things that are like, just bold statements. Like, this is fact.
Yeah.
And one of those is the best way to build up your base level of knowledge is by reading books. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But
it's true for him. Is it true for everyone?
Don't know. Mind you, there's probably a pretty significant trend of people who do read versus those who do not do any reading, and you'd be able to get a strong correlation between success, if you will, and probably some of the other life factors.
I think it's also probably the way they are just as people is kind of, they're super mathematical. The way they reason things out is a very kind of logical, mathsy sort of. So that might stop a different type of person who's less inclined, like we're engineers, right?
Yeah.
So this type of communication probably, it's process driven, like we're like, great. But I wonder, I'd love to hear some feedback from some other people who perhaps haven't played in that space as much.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing.
Is it speaking their language?
To hit that on like the head is like towards the end of the podcast, and if he's like, yeah, so what you're saying is like the eventual outcome equals distinctiveness of your specific knowledge times by how much you leverage you can apply to that knowledge, times by how often your judgment is correct, times by how singularly accountable you are for the outcome, times by how society values what you're doing, times by compounded how long you can keep doing it, improving it over time.
Yeah. Oh, great.
And so somebody would just start hearing that and just be like,
yeah, that's it.
Go on.
Yeah.
Using a multiply sign. Yeah. It's too much going on here.
So what are you going to do with it?
I'm going to listen to it again
and figure that out.
No, I took so much away, so much away from this podcast. I don't mean to sort of bring it down towards the end there in saying that the tangible outcomes.
We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't love it, right?
Yeah.
So we loved this podcast. Don't get us wrong.
Yeah,
but it's good to see both sides of it too.
Yeah, I think, someone can get even if they get the takeaway, I might just start reading some books now. That's amazing. That's an amazing outcome all the way through to, you discovering or getting a real sort of clear idea as the three outcomes for achieving leverage, or 3 different types of leverage, I should say. My biggest takeaway was like wholly around the sort of action bias.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just how important it is to have that action bias, and successful people are action bias, particularly for me, right? So jumping on the specific knowledge stuff is I've been on and I think it's my take on this very early on in life is that it's like a continual journey, this this self-discovery, this like self-reflective exercise that just continues to happen. It's exciting, right? But as part of that, realizing that, I spent a lot of fucking time just planning things and working out, what if this happens, or, what if that happens, or what if I can't control this constraint, or, the classic engineer over-engineering it. Just get out there and do it. Just have a go.
You're going to learn a lot more from the feeling of doing it than you are from anything else, really.
Yeah.
As long as you're not taking ridiculous risk. That is the caveat. Don't figure out how to base jump by jumping off a building. You should look into that. Don't try open heart surgery day one of your medical degree, right? It's like certain activities require it, but
yeah, it's not to say forget about risk.
Cap the downside.
Yeah.
But start.
Yeah, just start doing it. So when you've capped that downside, when you've explored what the downsides are, just have a go.
Yeah.
Or when you're in, when you're not jumping off a cliff,
take a step forward.
Just take a step forward. There's no reason you can't call someone. There's no reason you can't go and start learning to download a coding academy type thing or whatever it is. There's so many different things you can do. It's about getting that sort of iterative process going and getting the feedback from the iterative process.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What about you, mate?
I think for me, it's the technology leverage. I'm going to look into that a lot more and the personal accountability is something and specific knowledge. I really want to think about what that is for me and put that out into the world. And it's kind of defined something I had bubbling around in my head already, but I hadn't thought about it in that way. And the power of combining those two things, having the courage to put your ideas out into the wider world is something I'm definitely going to push forward with. And this podcast's the start of it. So building that brand. And there's no reason that, given what the pie is, there's no reason that everyone can't build that brand. Yeah.
Everyone is unique. Everyone has the opportunity to build that brand. Yeah. Why not build that brand? I hate to sound so fucking motivational speaker like, but that's like a big takeaway.
Yeah.
And there's no reason you can't do that, Yeah,
that's it. And there's so much else. But to me, that's the stuff that's sitting with me right now.
Yep.
And just the understanding of the way that the pie grows and that sort of stuff as well. Yeah. Making sure you're always trying new things and reflecting on them and iterating.
Well, because there is so many people, mate, because the pie is growing, it is an efficient, the world is an efficient place, as he says, and that there are no get rich quick schemes.
No.
There is not. If someone else is trying to sell you that, they're just making money off you.
Yeah, that's it.
That's their way of getting rich is by getting money off you.
There are no get rich quick schemes. That's just someone else getting rich off you.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. Which is you see now like buy your Bitcoins here, buy your cryptocurrencies here. Look at this new initial coin offering. And
I'll teach you how to analyze that market or whatever.
Yeah, property, stocks, they're all like, it's and the saddest thing is that comes into this efficient world of competitive business environment. And, with now that we've got some of the top 25th percentile, say, psychologists or social engineers almost now working for some of these companies, they're able to market these things so well that they appear like they're a genuine thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sad. So if there's a takeaway from that, it's like there is no get rich quick schemes.
I think he says be impatient with actions. So do it, get moving, start it, but be patient with outcomes. So it's not going to happen quickly. You just need to do the right things over and over and over again. And over the long term, you'll win.
Yeah. If there's a really good quote there.
That's one I'm going to take away.
Yeah. Is, a year from now, you'll wish you'd started today.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it with that, mate.
That's a good way to motivationally round this off.
Well, let's get out there and do something.
Yeah, it's time to start doing something.
Cheers.
Cheers.